if you ever see one of these things, I don't care how long ago it was in your lifetime, the experience is burned into your brain. Absolutely burned into your brain. You've got, maybe there's a lot of details that you forget over the course of 30 or 40 years, but the main details of the encounter, they stick with you for a long, long time.
Norm, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you coming on here. We talked the other day and you told me what happened when you were a kid. I guess just walk us through the story again, if you don't mind. I hope you don't get tired of telling it. But how did you end up in the Bigfoot world?
I was a 12-year-old kid and growing up on a 1,200-acre ranch in Northern California. I had a younger brother. His name was Ken, and he was about 3 years younger than I was. The reason that we were kind of out there doing what we were doing is because my dad was a rancher. We had 1,200 acres, and 700 acres was for open range of cattle, and 500 acres was for walnut orchard. And in 1958, when this encounter occurred, I was 12 years old and my brother was about 10, I think, as I mentioned. And we had another kid that worked on the ranch with my brother and I, and he was about, I want to say about 11 years old. And my brother died in 1977. He was a engineer for Halliburton. They had an oil well gas well explosion in Wyoming out near Rock Springs, and everybody was killed in that explosion. And my buddy Jack, who I really never got to talk to as an adult about this encounter, I didn't know where he was for a long time. Finally, when I did track him down, I found out he had liver cancer that had metastasized to just about every place in his body. And I called him one day, and he said, Norm, he said, I'm just too sick and too weak to talk about this encounter. And so I never got to talk to him about how he remembered it and that kind of thing. So it's just me left. Getting back, my dad had this ranch. He was the superintendent of it. He managed it for a guy that lived in Los Angeles that had about 16 or 17 other ranches. So our ranch was just part of a big conglomeration of ranches. So my dad wanted to irrigate his orchard 24 hours a day. To do that, he hired a bunch of guys from local towns around there, Kelseyville, Lower Lake, to do it. And they were just a bunch of shiftless, worthless, no goods. You know, they drank on the job. They didn't do the job. They didn't show up for the job. You know, they slept all night on the job. You know, they're supposed to be out there working at midnight, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, moving irrigation pipe around the orchard. They didn't do that. So my brother came to me and he said, I got this idea, brother. He said, I think we can do it. We'll go to Dad and we'll just tell him, fire these shiftless, no good people and hire us to move all the irrigation pipe 24 hours a day on the ranch. So we went to my dad gave him our story, laid out our plan. And the first thing he said was, you guys are pretty young to do this out there in the middle of the night, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever, moving an irrigation pipe around. He said, I don't know. We told my dad, why don't you give us a couple of weeks to try it out and just see how we do. Anyway, get rid of those bums because they're not doing anything good for you. They're causing you more trouble than they're helping you. So my dad said, all right. So my mom would get up. She'd hear her rattling around in the kitchen, at 4 in the morning, and she'd go in there, and here we are, a bunch of little kids, 12, I'm 12, Jack's 11, my brother's 10. 3 of us were doing the work of 2 guys. So at the end of the 2 weeks, my dad said, fine, you're doing a pretty doggone good job, and so off we went. It was in that first year that we were moving irrigation pipe. It was a Sunday night, as I remember, and the sun had gone down. Very warm out. It was, there's no rain in Northern California all summer long. Doesn't rain, just stays dry. And of course, the whole purpose of irrigating the walnut orchard was to be able to irrigate every single inch of it at least 4 times between May and September. And September is when we went back to school. So we had all that summer to try to, keep this irrigation pipe moving, which we did. So anyway, it's about 7:30 on this Sunday night, and we're the only ones on the ranch. Jack and Kenny and myself, we're it, except for my mom and dad that were at home because we lived on the ranch. We had already moved the irrigation pipe to the position where we wanted it. And it was running really good. Irrigation system was pumping out a lot of water. We had 2 100 horsepower irrigation pumps, and then upstream from those pumps were 50 and 60 horsepower booster pumps that put out a lot of water. And so everything we did was that we moved this irrigation. We moved it while the water was running through it. So you put the last piece of irrigation pipe in the system, and the irrigation line that was a quarter of a mile long kind of sprung to life, because when the water hit the end of the line, it just started irrigating like nobody's business. And if you didn't have every piece of irrigation pipe put together just right and in a straight line, not all crooked, why, if you didn't do that, you had a blowout. And then you had to shut everything down and start all over and relay that irrigation line. So we got very, very good at what we were doing. So at 7:30, and we're driving around the orchard, the 3 of us, and we're checking the irrigation line, making sure that all the sprinklers are not plugged up, that nothing is blown apart, that the line hasn't, wiggled around under pressure and kinked itself into contorted kind of, designs out there, which can cause a blowout. So we were doing that. We were checking our work and checking it twice, really, make sure everything was good, because we were going to leave it alone for the next 8 hours and go do something else. And as we were driving down this ranch road, and we had miles and miles of ranch road, all dirt. We had this old 41 Chevy that my dad gave to us and said, this is your ranch truck. So anyway, we come down to the to a corner and had to make a right turn to head on down to our barns and equipment shed where we were going to take off our rubber boots and stuff like that. And my brother and Jack said to me, "Stop the truck. There's somebody walking in the orchard." And I said, "There's nobody supposed to be walking in the orchard. Nobody. Just the three of us, Mom and Dad, and they're home at the house." So I pulled the truck around to get a good look at what was going on. And back in this particular part of the orchard had some pretty big trees. These trees must have been, 30 feet high and maybe 40 feet wide. So we're looking back into the orchard, and sure enough, we all see a pair of legs walking in the orchard. And we went, "What the heck could that be? Who could be out here?" And we couldn't get a good look at who it was, because back in the trees it was darker, because no light could get in there. And as soon as I pulled the truck around into the orchard and stopped where I could get a good look at what was going on back in there, why, this thing started running. And it took off at a pretty good clip. So I put the old Chevy back in gear and off we go. And I told my brother and Jack, "You watch where that thing goes, and you tell me, and we'll go cut it off and see if we can get a better look at this thing." So I took off, and it was about a quarter of a mile down this ranch road to our barns. And at that point, I had to make a right turn onto a kind of a paved road and started up this hill. And once you went past the owner's house, had a house up there on the hill, had a really beautiful view of the ranch. And so when we went by his house, it got to the road got to be about 12 degrees, meaning that for every 100 feet that you go forward, you go up 12 feet. So it's very, very steep. So they're watching this thing, and they're telling me, I was going to stop and pull over. And they said, no, keep going. So I went up a little higher. I got about 3/4 to the top of the hill, and we pulled over and stopped, and we got out, and we could hear it coming through the orchard, but we couldn't see it. And we could hear it sounded like a horse that had been run real hard. My brother and I both had horses, and my dad had a horse, and had horses ever since we were little kids. But anyway, there we were outside the truck, standing up against the truck, waiting for this thing, whatever the hell it was. We knew it was bipedal. Didn't refer to it amongst ourselves as bipedal. That was not a word that we would have known what it meant.
All right.
Didn't realize that something that was bipedal just navigated around on 2 feet, We didn't know that. So we're waiting for this thing to come out of the orchard, and we're hearing this huffing and puffing. And the orchard had been irrigated and they irrigated on top of soil that had been cultivated down to about 12, 14 inches deep. It was not easy going walking through that orchard or running as this thing was doing. And so it was expending a lot of energy. And when we finally saw it, we just looked at this thing, and we looked at each other, and we did not know what in the world we were looking at. We had no earthly idea. Kind of got a little spooky, but we didn't feel any real danger. Didn't feel any sense of dread. like other people talk about in their encounters. Even people that don't even see these critters talk about how there's just a sense of dread comes over them, and it just almost paralyzes them. Well, we didn't have anything like that. We're standing there next to the pickup. In front of us is this big drainage ditch. It's about maybe 12 feet deep or so, maybe, 18 feet wide. And we felt pretty comfortable that whatever we were looking at, trying to run through the orchard, was not going to get us because they had this big ditch in front of us. And we figured the thing couldn't get over that ditch. Little did I know from all the podcasts that I've listened to as an adult and for the last many years, that drainage ditch would have provided no protection really whatsoever to these things. Probably could have hopped across that thing and snatched us up if they wanted to. But anyway, this thing come out of the orchard, and we're looking at it, and it's looking at us, and it's all covered in hair. It's got these massive feet. It never really left any good kind of tracks because of the soil it's running in. And when it was running, it never really took its foot or its feet out of the soil. And so when it went to make the next step, it kind of shuffled through this deep soil, and every time it took a step, just a big cloud of dust. So when it got to the point where it was right within maybe, 20, 25 feet of us, I took a really good look in it. My brother and Jack were saying, let's get back in the truck and let's get out of here. I said, no, let's see what this thing is. And it came really close, about 25 feet. It had the face of an Indian, had a round head. There was no hair on the face whatsoever. It had a very pronounced brow ridge and big black dark eyes set way back in its head, and the rest of its body all covered with hair, dark brown. The arms, that was one thing that we looked at, and it had the longest arms I'd ever seen on something that looked kind of human. And these hands looked like catcher's mitts. They were so huge. And so when I was asked a long time ago about by a podcaster what it looked like, and I described it as looking like a Plains Indian, he sent me a picture. I think it was the next day after I had talked to him, and this picture was of a face of a Sasquatch that a guy by the name of Woolley, who was down in Louisiana, he was deer hunting, and he was in his deer stand when he saw this thing jump out of a tree and then shake the tree like nobody's business. And when he got a look at him, I don't know if he looked at him through his rifle scope or what he did, but he saw what he recorded in a podcast that he saw was the same thing I saw. It looked so human, and it looked just like a Plains Indian. But other than that, my Sasquatch was about 7.5 feet tall, and he probably weighed 550 pounds, maybe 600. He was not massive like some people describe on their encounters, where they talk about something that was 700, 800, 900 pounds, big conical head. all that kind of stuff, hair all over its face, something like what Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin saw up on Willow Creek in Humboldt County when they had their encounter with Patty.
Right.
And Patty was a female, and what we saw that night was a male. We could clearly see its genitalia. It had male junk that was protruding down there, and we saw that. And then when it made its turn, started going up the hill, as it was making that turn, it grinned at us. Never showed us any teeth, nothing like that. Just a grin that showed me that its mouth and its jaws were big, much, much bigger than anything I'd ever seen on any human. So again, we had no clue what we're looking at. And this encounter took place in 1958. Nobody was talking about Bigfoot.
No.
At least not where I lived. Nobody was talking about that stuff. So this thing started up the hill, made no effort to jump over and get a better look at us or nothing like that. It just come out of the orchard, grinned at us, and went up the hill. So we got back in the truck, and we went up. We followed it up the hill, and it was going a little faster than the old Chevy I had. I couldn't really get Chevy out of second gear. And so we got up to the top of the hill, and there was a kind of a confluence of ranch roads up there. We had a four-way intersection. By the time I got to the top, I had gained a little distance on this critter. And when the critter ran into the intersection, he turned and looked back at us. And the way that he did that was he couldn't turn his head and look at us. He had to completely turn his whole body from the waist up and completely turn around his whole upper body so he could look back at us. And we just kept after him. And when we got up to the four-way intersection, he'd already run into another section of our orchard that was on top of the hill, and it was just a couple of degrees in slope, so it was much closer to being flat ground than what he'd been running in when we saw him. So we took off across this top of this hill through another section of our orchard, and I turned left, and I had to really hustle because that orchard, it had been plowed, but when he got to the point where it was a downhill slope, the rows of the trees are planted 50-foot square. So in every single direction, if you were in the orchard and you walked in any direction, if you were standing next to a tree and you walked to another tree in a diagonal or any other angle, it was 50 feet to the next tree. And when this thing started running downhill, he really picked up speed. And so he actually gained a little bit of ground. I had to really hustle. And so I got down to the bottom of the hill, and here he came, and he ran out in front of us on another ranch road. And he just kind of jumped off the bank and into the road and took off down the road. And about 75 or 100 yards in front of us was another ranch that adjoined our ranch. And their barns and their equipment shed and all that stuff were within about 100 yards of where we came out there, where this Bigfoot was. And so he kept running and kind of kept looking back at us, and just that same way that I described that he did up on top of the hill, had to turn his whole body to look back at us. So he ran between Ted Wiper's barns and his equipment shed, and ran then through a section of their orchard, and we followed right along behind him. And when he cleared going through the barns, he started running through their orchard. Their orchard was adjoined by thousands of acres of brushland, some timber on it, pine trees, but mostly just about 30-foot high brush. And when that critter got to the brush, he plowed through it like a bulldozer. There was no way I could have followed him with a pickup. I couldn't have followed him on foot. I would have had to have some kind of a bulldozer to be able to run through that brush like that critter did. And so when we got to that point where he ran into the brush, well, I just stopped and shut the truck off. And we could hear him just running through the brush. Never made a sound, just crashing through that brush until we couldn't hear him anymore. What we originally thought when we first saw this thing was that it was a runaway firefighter from the forestry firefighting camp, which was about 1.5 miles as the crow would fly from our ranch. And we had some instances where these guys that are on work leave up there and in these forestry firefighting camps, and these guys, they would pull them out of San Quentin on a special detail, and they bring them up to Lake County and Sonoma County and all those northern counties where we had a lot of summer fires, and they would put those guys to work clearing brush and fighting fire. And they did a really good job, and because they didn't want to go back to San Quentin. And so it was minimal supervision. So that's how they could just, run off. And in some cases, they got into the trunks of some of these old cars that some of our ranching neighbors had, where you could just turn the knob on the trunk and crawl in. There was those cars back in the 50s. You could hide out in those things real easy. And so that's what they do. They would hide in the car until somebody went to town, and then they would get out of the trunk and try to make their escape. But their uniform would normally give them away, and they'd be caught within no time. So that's kind of what we thought this thing was when we first got a glimpse of it. But it wasn't anything like that. After we had this encounter, my brother and Jack wanted to run off to my dad, and tell him about this encounter. And I told him, I said, listen, we go tell Dad what happened out here. He's going to say, you guys are too young to be out here. It sounds like it's going to be too dangerous, that you might get hurt by something out here that's running around that shouldn't be out there, or that we don't know anything about. So I talked him into never telling my dad. And so we never did. So a year or year and a half later, maybe just a little bit more, while my dad had a subscription to a magazine called True Magazine. And in that magazine, they chronicled the adventures of a guy by the name of Jerry Crew. And Jerry Crew was a bulldozer operator working for a company that was contracted to a lumber company up in up closer to McKinleyville and up in there, out closer to the Pacific Ocean than Willow Creek. So they were making all these logging roads up there with these big D7 and D8 Caterpillar dozers. And so they started running these logging trucks on these roads, and these trucks had 14-foot bunks on them. I mean, they were so big, that they couldn't haul. It was against the law for them to haul on public highways. So they built their own roads from where they were logging in the woods all the way down to Scotia and Rio Dell and places like that, and or up near Eureka, where they would build their own roads through all this timberland that the Louisiana Pacific and Georgia Pacific and a number of other companies owned all this land. So these guys could build these roads, and they built them all the way from the woods all the way to the lumber camps and the sawmills. It was to see. And so after the hundreds, if not thousands, of trips that these logging trucks that weighed way more than could ever be put on a public highway, they drove on these logging roads until there was about 4 or 5 inches of silty dirt on top of the road. And so when Jerry Crew and his bunch of guys, a bunch of bulldozer operators and truck drivers, they'd go home for the weekend, and they'd come back on a Monday morning, and they'd look, and there were footprints on their equipment. There were big footprints on the ground. And in some cases, they had some damage done. One instance I remember was they talked about they came back to work on a Monday, and one of their logging trucks the cab of the truck had been smashed down clear to the frame. Gas tanks all smashed in, everything, just completely totaled the truck. And some of the diesel fuel tanks, and they kept diesel fuel for all their equipment in these 55-gallon drums, and a 55-gallon drum completely full of diesel fuel weighs over 500 pounds. And they found some of these things that something, they didn't know what it was, picked it up like you would pick it up with a forklift and just throw it down the canyon into the creek. And so Jerry Crew personally brought a camera to work and started taking pictures of these big footprints. And then he went to a place in Eureka where they had a small newspaper going, little regional newspaper. And in there they talked about, some weird encounters that people had where they saw something they couldn't explain looking over the back fence at their dogs or chickens or whatever they had. So Jerry went to the owner of this little local magazine and filed his story with this man who was retired from the Los Angeles Times. And so Jerry told his story, and this man published his story and his pictures, and that story made its way, I think, into some of the bigger newspapers in the United States, certainly into the San Francisco Examiner and Chronicle and the Sacramento Bee and all those kinds of stories, and even maybe back in Chicago or possibly even at the New York Times, I'm not sure. But it got a lot of publication, got a lot of publicity. And so when I read that article, then I gave it to my brother. And I said, you need to read this because I think this will tell you what it is that we saw. And they had some kind of a drawing in there that, looked like, it didn't look like anything that I saw, but it was close enough that began to realize that we'd seen this creature that kind of got named by the Bigfoot by Jerry Crew and his outfit over there of bulldozer operators. So a year or two passed. My dad's younger brother was general manager of a sheep ranch, a 4,000-acre sheep ranch over on the Mendocino, not the Mendocino, I'm sorry, the Sonoma coast. And he had 4,000 acres over there. And the wild hogs would get into the sheep herd, and they'd kill them and eat them, especially the lambs. So anyway, my dad and a bunch of my uncle's buddies, they killed a bunch of wild hogs, and my dad shot a couple of them over there, and he took the meat from one of the bigger ones that he shot. He took about 200 pounds of meat and brought it home. So on the back of our house, and like I say, we lived way out in the country. Nearest neighbors, a few miles away. So, we would shoot deer on our own property. Before it was even deer season, we'd go out and kill us a nice little buck, and then we'd dress it out, and we'd hang it on the back of the house for a few days and let it kind of cure out that way. So we had these big hooks that were screwed into the eaves of the house on the back of the house where my mom had a clothesline. And so we'd hang these deer out there. So anyway, when my dad came home from my uncle's place, he had about, 175, 200 pounds of hog meat. And so he hung it out there on the back of the house on these big hooks. And for him to do that, he had to stand on at least a 6-foot ladder to get up there because it was about 11 feet from the ground, which was concrete, right there where the steps from my mom's washroom came out, where she had all her clotheslines and all that stuff. And so he had to stand on a 6.5-foot ladder to hang this big old slabs of meat up there. So anyway, every night he'd hang the meat out there, and every morning for 3 days he'd go out there and he'd take it off the house, roll it up in an old bed sheet, put it in an old sleeping bag, and slide it under mom and dad's bed where it was kind of cool, and did that for about 3 days. So about the morning of the 4th day, Dad goes out there to take down his hog meat off these hooks. It's not there. My dad comes in. My brother and I are having breakfast, as I recall. My dad comes in there and he said, "You know anything about the fact that the hog meat I've got is gone? Did you guys do anything with the hog meat?" "No, Dad, we didn't do anything." He said, "Well, maybe the coyotes got it." So that time, my brother and I were out there. We're curious what's going on. And my mom's out there too. And my dad says, "Yeah, maybe the coyotes took it." And I'm thinking, well, if the coyotes took it, anything that they get, they just make a big mess, And we had deer that coyotes had run down and run them into our fences, and then they drag them off and eat them, and they just make a horrible mess. And so there was nothing like that around our house. And so my dad said, "Well, the only other thing it could be is the dogs did it." Well, the dogs were not even anywhere to be found. My dad told my brother and I, "Go find the dogs." So we looked around. We finally find all the dogs. We had about 4 or 5 dogs at the ranch at all times. And some were pretty good dogs, others just good pets. And so we get those dogs and we try to coax them over there where the meat had been hanging on these hooks. These dogs would have nothing to do with that area. You couldn't call them into that area. They just wouldn't come. I grabbed a couple of those dogs by the collar and I dragged them over to where this meat had been hung. And these dogs, I mean, really, really threw a fit. They did not want to go there. And as soon as I let go of them, they hauled ass out of there and took off for other parts of the ranch. They did not want to have anything to do with that area at the back of our house. So my brother and I, we looked at each other, knowing what we pretty much thought we knew, that we had a Sasquatch, because our ranch, it butted up to a lot of brush land, a lot of forest land in the back, tens of thousands of forest back there on Sigler Mountain. Maybe they had a Sasquatch, Bigfoot living back there. I never saw one back there, but maybe there was one back there. But that's the end of the story right there. And my dad and my brother and Jack, they went to the grave, and there was no more talking about Bigfoot. And to my knowledge, there's only maybe another 1 or 2 sightings of Bigfoot in Lake County. Some people think we got wolves up there and black bear, and we don't. But in Middle Tennessee, where I live now, we got black bear, we got Sasquatch, we got a lot of stuff running around here that people are seeing and reporting. But that was a long time ago, and I will tell you, and some of your listeners will know that I'm telling you the way it is, that if you ever see one of these things, I don't care how long ago it was in your lifetime, the experience is burned into your brain, absolutely burned into your brain. You've got, maybe there's a lot of details that you forget over the course of 30 or 40 years, but the main details of the encounter, they stick with you for a long, long time. I'm sure that some of your listeners out there know exactly what I'm talking about with their encounters. So Matt, that's it, brother.
Man, what an experience to have as a young kid. Did you guys talk about it amongst yourselves ever after the encounter happened?
My brother and I may have talked about it. I don't think we ever talked about it. One thing I didn't mention is that after we'd seen this Bigfoot, and because this took place in late July of '58, we were almost to deer season in Lake County. Lake County deer season was the first Saturday of August, so we're real close. So I started carrying this 25-35 model 94 Winchester in the truck. And my dad wanted to know, why are you doing that? And I said, well, if I see a buck over here, Dad, in the orchard, I'm just going to pop him. Oh, okay. All right. So, that just kind of came, that conversation just kind of came and went. But I will tell you that on those nights where we were out there at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, moving irrigation pipe, I got the feeling that somebody was out there with me. Somebody was out there watching me, and it got real creepy. And And so, my dad had bought us these minor lights. It lit up the orchard pretty good. I know that Jack and Kenny both had the same kind of experience, that they just thought something was out there still kind of looking at us and following us around. And like a lot of witnesses have talked about, over the years that I've been listening to podcasts, that they report some of these Sasquatch can cloak themselves. Somehow they can do that, and where you can't see them. And so I would spin around at night, knowing for sure in my mind that there was something 20, 30 feet behind me that was just standing there watching me. And I'd spin around, and there was nothing there. Nothing. Never was anything. And so, my brother and I, we probably talked about that stuff, but we sure didn't talk about it around my mom and dad, because, like I said, if we'd have lost that job, then we would have lost a lot of money. My brother and Jack and I worked that very job every summer until all of us went off to college. So we did it for a long, long time. As young guys, we made really decent money, and my dad never had to worry about that part of the operation on the ranch, because we did such a good job. And we weren't about to do anything that was going to screw that job up or lose some of the aspects of it. I later on went on to join the California Highway Patrol after I got out of the military. My dad died in 1968. I'd moved back on the ranch, and for that whole summer between April and August, when I reported for duty at the California Highway Patrol Academy in Sacramento, why I just stepped in and helped the owner run the ranch. I wasn't born on that ranch, but I was there ever since I was 4 years old.
I wanted to ask you something. Were the walnuts in season? What do you think it was doing in the orchard?
It was just traveling through, and it just used the orchard as camouflage. And the trees were just starting to get walnuts on them in July, because we would pick walnuts, probably late October, early November, something like that. It would have got diarrhea if it would have eaten those walnuts at that period of time, because that's exactly, the dogs would try to do that. They'd try to eat these walnuts a little too soon. And next thing you know, the dog was wheezing and coughing, and he had diarrhea, and he was sick, and they learned real quick, don't eat the walnuts. Not too good for you. It was a very interesting experience I had. For years, we always looked to see if we could ever have another experience like that. And in a way, we kind of thought maybe it's best we don't see another one of those things, because maybe next time we'll run into something that's not in a very good mood, and somebody get hurt. And so, we never had any further encounters. And I know Jack and some of my other high school buddies hunted in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and they never reported having any run-ins with Sasquatch. I think this is just my opinion, means nothing, but I think that seeing these Bigfoot creatures is more about them wanting to reveal themselves to us than us maybe running into them. Yeah, I'm sure we're going to people have these encounters in Alaska where they're fly fishing, and they just kind of look around the bend of the lake, and there's a Bigfoot all crouched down there, eating fish or whatever, and those kinds of encounters exist. But I think for the most part, they want to be seen as opposed to us finding them, where we can see them. I mean, we can hear them, we can smell them sometimes, I guess, and all that happens. And in our experience with this Bigfoot on the ranch, we didn't smell anything, nothing. But he had big feet, big hands, and long arms covered with hair. He was your typical Bigfoot. I'm thinking this thing saw 3 little kids out there and thought, there's nothing I can do to these little kids, nothing I want to do to these little kids. Just kind of smile at them, grin at them, don't show them any teeth, don't show them any aggression, and don't stop. Just keep going. And that's exactly what he did. He never stopped, never slowed down. And the stamina, the thing that I remember the most is the stamina that this thing had. Because my brother and Jack, we were out there in this terrain every day, 3 times a day, moving irrigation pipe every 8 hours. And so we know what the terrain was like that this thing was trying to run in. And as good a shape as we were as little kids, I don't think we could have come anywhere close to doing I don't think we could have run I'd say 3/4 of a mile through the orchard up and down those steep hills. I don't think we could have done it. It's just too steep. And, the soil is cultivated too deep, and it's just too hard of going. Didn't seem like it was much of a impediment to this critter that we saw. And so, I'm pretty sure that Jack and Ken and us wouldn't have minded seeing one. But how often would you be able to see one where your encounter was so benign, and it came so close to you?
Yeah.
And it revealed itself completely, 100%. I mean, what are the chances of that? It's just, to me, a very rare occurrence, and one that I don't forget.
No, for sure. It's extremely remarkable. I appreciate you reaching out to me and coming on here and sharing the story, for sure.
Hey, no problem. Glad to tell the story. Maybe it'll change some people's minds out there, and I'm sure there's other people out there just going to say, yep, I know exactly what he's talking about. We're glad that nobody got hurt, and I'm glad that I saw what I saw. And, I've got other friends that have seen him. And Matt here on the program, we were talking about a friend that has had, according to him, probably over 40 encounters with Bigfoot. That's a lot of encounters. And I was just hoping for one more, maybe. This friend of mine got about 40. What the heck you talking about? But I've got some friends down in Louisiana, and they've told, you have to kind of rewind and listen to some of their stories. Some of them are really, really out there, really stretch your imagination if you listen to them. But I know these people, and I know the kind of people they are. And I know they're not prone to telling untruths. They tell the truth, and they tell it exactly the way they saw it. And I listen to them tell those stories, and I know they're telling the truth. I mean, it's just their body language. It's just their tone of voice. It all kind of tells me that. And sometimes some of these guys get a little choked up when they talk about these things because they had the peace scared out of them. And when that happens, you want to run away. And a lot of these people just do that. They grab whatever they've got out there, packing equipment, camping equipment, whatever they got, and they get the hell out of Dodge because these things are out there at night poking their tents and reaching under the tent and grabbing them and doing all kinds of stuff that is so completely unnerving that those people are marked forever with those kinds of stories. And 99 times out of 100, they never even saw this critter that is out there doing this stuff to them. And later the next day they see all these footprints around their campsite. So they know it's not some other hunter out there being stupid, because you mess around like that, you get shot.
Oh, for sure.
Damn right. Down here in Tennessee, these guys won't mess around. They'll plug you. You go messing around like that.
I just talked to a guy, as a matter of fact, who is going to come on the podcast pretty soon, who was with a group of people at a cabin in Tennessee around the Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge area. And they had an experience with something poking around the cabin and the vehicles and stuff at nighttime. And, I was talking to him about that. Like, humans don't do that, unless they're up to no good. And that's just a dangerous situation. I think that most people, even the ones that aren't up to any good, if you're a human, you're going to think twice about going around and messing with somebody at nighttime like that.
Yeah, you are. And, of course, there's a guy by the name of Dave Paulides, and a lot of you might be familiar with his books, 411. There's a lot of people, hunters, fly fishermen, they go into the Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, those mountains back in there, and that's the last time they're ever seen. They're gone. They go in there and they disappear. And a lot of that goes on in Tennessee. This is a wild place down here for any of y'all that want to come to Tennessee and start looking around for Bigfoot. Well, you got a good chance of coming into contact because we got a lot of them. There's a lot of stories, and some of them are pretty wild, where a lot of people retreat to their cabin, and then all night long they're just being bombarded with rocks or something, and they get the heck out of there when the sun comes up. Yeah, these Bigfoot, there's all kinds of them. Good-natured ones. There's a few stories floating around about the Department of Interior going in and doing away with just exterminating a lot of these Bigfoot families or tribes, whichever you want to call them, because they're interfering with military operations at places like Fort Lewis, Washington, but kind of backs up, I think, to Mount Rainier. So there's plenty of space back there, and there's plenty of stories from other military people that were sworn to secrecy that after about 15 or 20 years, they tell their story about how special operations, how Navy SEAL teams went in and just absolutely obliterated these tribes of Bigfoot, killed them all. Came in with a CH-47, picked them up in a great big cargo net, hauled them away to whatever they do with them after they haul them away. And there's all those kinds of stories too. Every kind of story you can think of is being told about Bigfoot encounters. So be prepared if you go out there for the first time. You know, you might run into something that doesn't like you very much. You just don't know.
Norm, thanks again for joining me, coming on and sharing your story. And hopefully it will reach some listeners that may have had their own encounter and want to come forward and share theirs.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, shame on you if you don't want to tell the story. They're all worth telling. And I'll tell you for one thing, once you tell your story, you're going to feel better that you did it. It's just going to take a load off of you because you're talking to people that are not criticizing you, not calling you names, and they believe what you say. Because they figure, what do you got to lose? Be criticized, made fun of, if you're trying to tell some goofy made-up story. No, we're all telling the truth, I think. Maybe there's some out there that aren't, but I think they're few and far between. And if you listen to how they tell the story, you're going to draw out your own conclusions about whether it happened or not. So anyway, thanks, Matt, for taking the time to let me tell my story and just kind of ramble on. I'm an old guy now, and that's kind of what old guys do. We just kind of start going down memory lane. But thanks again.